spokesperson Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's always a pleasure to contribute under your speakership, particularly when your contribution to this particular issue has been commented on by other members is so considerable in your parliamentary career. I also pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Paisley and Renfrewshire North. Your passionate love for your community and your family reflects well on you, and also gives them faith that you will act in their best behalf on your time here. I also give tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green, whose contribution to this debate is also noted, again spoken warmly around the Chamber already. Experts often talk about the pressure points of geopolitics, places on earth where the strategic aims of different countries coincide, clash and create tension. What is far too often left out of these conversations is the reality of living in those pressure points for millions of people. And Madam Deputy Speaker, the Taiwanese people are living in real fear on one of these pressure points. It should be telling for all of us that despite being an advanced economy and a thriving democracy with high living standards and strong manufacturing, with cultural links to the rest of the world, Taiwan feels increasingly isolated and vulnerable in the face of the Chinese government. That is testament to the fact that no matter how hard they have worked to build a robust democracy on that island, it does not in and of itself protect those liberties and securities that we all deserve to rely upon. They deserve our support as we enter the second half of this decade, and this motion today can help us continue to do that. The Liberal Democrats stand with the people of Taiwan. Any Chinese aggression or threats to their free speech and human rights are unacceptable. The Liberal Democrats will continue to support our friends, the Democratic Progressive Party, the governing party of Taiwan, a long-standing member of Liberal International and a founding member of the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. In our manifesto, we called for the building of new diplomatic, economic and security partnerships with democracies threatened by China, including Taiwan. And it is something we will gladly work with the government to deliver, because an issue of this importance should transcend party politics, and I am reassured by the voices and the statements heard from around the House in this debate today. Fundamentally, what is at stake in Taiwan is a question of moral obligation, one that we have always had to confront and that Liberals have always been clear in answering. Can we stand up for people living outside of recognised sovereign states, who cherish the same freedoms we do and have the same inviolable right to self-determination that we do, against neighbours with increasingly imperial objectives? Or are we forced to live in a world where, as was said in antiquity, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must? Put simply, does might make right? The people of Taiwan deserve us to answer that question with our clear and resounding support as they go about trying to integrate into the system of international governance. Therefore, the government should listen to the story being told in this House today and make clear that in its dealings with the Chinese government, it will establish clear red lines, calling out violations of Taiwan's territory at land and sea as unacceptable. The government should work with its international partners to remove the obstacles facing Taiwan to joining various international bodies. Taiwan's exclusion from the World Health Organization serves to prove this point, has been commented on already by many members. Despite a successful approach to handling the COVID-19 pandemic, Taiwan was again rebuffed in its attempts to join the organisation, with China vetoing its accession until such a time as it gives in to their territorial claim on the island. This compounded our ability and the abilities of countries around the world to learn from the lessons of their successful response to COVID-19 and will have cost many, many lives. Taiwan finds itself unable to properly access and work alongside Interpol, leaving it excluded from the international crime-fighting network that it needs, not least because the South China Sea region is where international criminals are known to operate. This should concern all of us. Taiwan's exclusion from these bodies makes international cooperation harder. It weakens a strategic ally in the region, and it emboldens states like China and Russia to feel that their attempts to undermine the liberal world order will succeed. Indeed, how can we justify that liberal and democratic world order without ensuring it offers protections to those who subscribe to it and wish to join and collaborate with the institutions that are so key to maintaining that very world order? We've already left so many countries around the world vulnerable to the influence of states like China. The last government's short-sighted and naive decision to consistently cut the UK's foreign aid budget, slashing our international development credentials, shrinking our world-renowned diplomatic service, forcing cuts to our historic BBC World Service output, and undermining our standing as a major power on the world stage. These steps have left a vacuum in Africa, in Asia, and in parts of Europe too. We should not be remotely surprised that China has increasingly sought to fill that gap with debt traps and political influence through its Belt and Road Initiative. But it is up to this government to do something about it, confirming that the One China policy is not the policy of this government and that Taiwan will be supported in acceding to various international bodies would be a key step in the right direction. They must be willing to discuss Taiwan with the Chinese government as they embark on a new era of bilateralism with President Xi. I note that in the Labour Party's manifesto earlier this year, they committed to a new approach to China, being willing to cooperate where we can, compete where we need to, and challenge where we must, as part of a wider audit of their China strategy. Those were welcome words, which is why it is disappointing to read coverage this week of the leaked news that Taiwan's former president, Tsai Ing-wen, had been due to visit the UK and speak with MPs last month before the Foreign Office intervened to cancel. I am keen to take this opportunity to ask the government to respond to this claim and explain to this House exactly why, as it seems, former President Tsai was denied a visit. We all recognise that diplomacy is difficult, and I sincerely hope the government can put mine and other honourable members' minds at rest that this was an oversight. But if it was not, and a decision taken out of deference to the Chinese government ahead of the Prime Minister's recent meeting with President Xi, the government will not be surprised to hear me say that that is unacceptable. The government's new approach to China should be characterised by a defence of our values and therefore the robust support of Taiwan. That is why the Liberal Democrats have called for the government to issue a comprehensive China strategy, which places human rights, effective rules-based multilateralism and working with our European partners centre stage. Without that, we risk further backsliding into a world where China feels able to act with impunity and Taiwan will continue to suffer. I ask the Minister to provide an update on when the government will provide this House with an update on its China strategy audit so that we can scrutinise it and ensure it lives up to those values. Just last month, China simulated a full-scale invasion of the island through war games in the South China Sea. As the Honourable Member for East Renfrewshire has already spoken about, in late 2021 and early 2022, we watched Russian forces massing on the Ukrainian border and we attempted to convince ourselves that the inevitable was not about to occur. And I will quote a great man who hangs heavy over many of us in this place: those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
What we're doing now.
Imagine living with the threat of such a war on your doorstep. We've all been paying close attention to the terrible scenes unfold in Ukraine and the Middle East in recent years. We all know that the horrors of war have not been eased, but rather compounded by modern technology. Imagine witnessing those scenes on your TV screens whilst knowing the very same could happen to your home and your family in the very near future. The journey to recognition and accession to international bodies for Taiwan is long and will not be solved overnight. But the government can play a key role in making that journey easier by showing its support for Taiwan as clearly as it can. And it can do the right thing on human rights in China more widely too. It can choose to recognise the genocide happening to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang Autonomous Region. It can stand with Hong Kongers who are already living with the experience of creeping authoritarianism from Beijing. And the government can champion the cause of international laws and norms in the face of growing disorder and violence around the world. I invite them to do so and to regularly report back to this House on such a China strategy is developing. Because Britain is at its best when it stands with those facing oppression and says clearly, with one voice, that the days of might makes right are well and truly consigned to history. Thank you.
I now call the